I'm Mark Sponsler, and welcome to the Stormsurf Video Surf Forecast for the week starting Sunday, December 5th.
Stormsurf, waves, weather, buoys, altimetry, snow, temperatures, El Niño, weather analysis, real data for outdoor people, all the time, no hype.
Looking at significant wave heights for the North Pacific Ocean, we see remnants of a gale north of Hawaii, still producing 20-foot seas, aimed a bit west of the islands, but other than that, a placid pattern is in control, at least for the moment. Let's get into the details. As usual, we'll start by looking at jet stream level winds. These winds up about 30,000 feet help support the formation of gales, and when they form, help direct their track. We're looking for a trough, a dip in the jet, just like here. A massive dip, that is. And what that helps do is create a counterclockwise flow aloft and down at the ocean surface. That's the hallmark of low pressure. And low pressure generates winds, and winds, of course, get traction on the ocean surface. That generates seas, and seas, if they're high enough, as they radiate away from the fetch area, turn into swell, and swell, when it hits your beach, turns into surf. So a trough is what you need in the upper atmosphere to get the whole thing rolling. All right, so right now we have winds, not that strong, pushing off Japan. Big ridge, ridging north up, that is pushing to the north. That supports high pressure here, and up to the central Aleutian Islands, then falling hard south, forming that trough we were talking about, and that, of course, has generated low pressure and swell that is currently hitting Hawaii. And then a big ridge off the U.S. West Coast, keeping things high and dry for the moment. And let's see how this plays out over the coming days. As we get into Monday, the trough actually starts to get cut off. You see the wind energy traveling more up here, not falling down into this trough anymore. And so it will cease to support gale development. And then it might try to reorganize a little bit here on Wednesday, but still pretty much just remaining cut off with the jet well off to the north. Now notice, let's go back here just a little bit. A new trough tries to organize in the North Gulf on Wednesday, being fed by, 140 knot winds. Maybe, just maybe, offering a little bit of support for gale development, but not much is expected at all from it. And it's not until really Saturday that wind energy starts ridging into the Bering Sea and then falling hard south into the Gulf of Alaska. Very much like the trough that set up just north of Hawaii this past weekend. Only this time it's going to set up in the central to eastern Gulf of Alaska, really focusing on Oregon and California with, what was that, right about there, 190 knot winds falling south. That certainly is going to do something to help create a low pressure, if not a storm, in the Gulf of Alaska if it forms. And then there we are, we're a week out. So all this a bit to be determined. Also notice, though, that the jets start splitting here right around the date line as we get a week from now, too. The active phase of the MJO is developing over here, and we are cautiously optimistic that the jet might really start raging over in this area over the next 2 weeks or so. All right, let's go take a look down at the surface. Here we are, surface level pressure, surface level winds. You see not a whole lot going on at the moment. The last little remnants of the low, there's Hawaii right there, the low right there, and a little bit of fetch here at 30 knots from the north, but not really doing anything to generate swell. And the low cut off, spinning west of Hawaii, even as we get into Monday and Tuesday, generating 30 knot northwest or northeast winds, but all aimed away from Hawaii and the U.S. West Coast. Also notice as we get, let's go back in time here just a little bit. As we get into Monday, this gale starts developing almost over the Aleutian Islands with a little bit of fetch south. That should get some traction on the ocean surface. Then as we get into Tuesday, it sort of lifts up into the northern Gulf. But then here, you can still see right here, as we get into Tuesday night and Wednesday, starts falling through the Gulf again, generating some, probably getting traction on the ocean surface. Also notice a gale developing over here as well. It's pretty strong storm status, 50 knot wind. So we're into Wednesday night, a storm trying to develop over the North Dateline region, intersection of the Dateline and the Aleutians, and still some fetch in the northern Gulf of Alaska. Now this gale becomes the focus of attention because we know there's a developing trough in this area. Certainly that trough this gale starts getting some traction as we get into Friday with 35 knot winds, quickly building to 40 knots and 35 knots and even 30 knots over a pretty large area aimed well at the U.S. West Coast. We're into Friday night. Saturday, that situation holds. And then strong high pressure over here, 1040 millibar high with the low right here at, what's that, about 72 millibars. And the difference in pressure between the high and the low creates a gradient, a tightening in the isobars here. And that starts generating this fetch at 45 to 50 knots. 45 knots even into Sunday, falling south off along the California coast. Notice a front right here, like over northern California Sunday night. Here we are at 180 hours, that front pushing down the coast, giving us some opportunity perhaps for precipitation and generating more fetch off the coast, aimed a little bit halfway in between California and Hawaii. So we'll see how this all plays out. Still quite a bit early in the time frame to believe the models just yet. All right, so significant wave heights. What's the effect of those winds on the ocean surface? And we're actually going back in time to Friday. Was that 2 days ago? When this low started building north of Hawaii. Seas building 26 feet, and then a second pulse, barely a tiny little area, 30-foot seas aimed south. Swell is already hitting the Hawaiian Islands. It really pretty much peaked out this morning, Sunday morning. Little waves at Waimea Bay, probably in the 15-foot range or so, and probably other islands receiving some pretty sizable swell as well. Pure swell in the 12 feet at 15-second range this morning, so that's good for some pretty decent-sized surf. All right, anyway, so as we got into Saturday night, that gale started fading, and then through Sunday, it faded out. And then here we are going forward. Now we know not a whole lot going to happen. There's this little gale that's pushing right, there we go, Monday night or Sunday night. Little gale pushing through the Gulf, into the northern Gulf. We know it's supposed to build a little bit. Generates, 22-foot seas, maybe 23-foot seas. That's not much. Pushing south, maybe breaks north of Point Conception. We'll see small swell from this. But then the bigger event is this system forecast for the northern Gulf. As we get into Friday, you can see it starting to build with, was that 20, 22, 24, 25-foot seas and 26-foot seas. There we go. 28-foot seas building to 30 feet on Saturday morning, and then 31 feet right down here, the highest seas over this entire domain. And then to 32 and 33 feet, and then 34, almost 35 feet on Saturday night, falling south and holding even into Sunday morning at 35 feet. So that's actually an upgrade from this morning's 12Z run of the model, so that's good. And then falling south from there, whoops, and you can see already raw wave energy impacting California. You get a sense that there's some sort of sideband energy forecast for the Hawaiian Islands as well. Size to be determined. Again, this is still 5+ days out from forming, so a bit preliminary to get too worked up at it over it just yet. Quick look at winds for California and the Hawaiian Islands today. North, not too bad near shore relative to north and central California, but over our waters, 15-20 knot north winds, sort of bumping things up a little bit, making some warble. South winds in the Hawaiian Islands, clean enough to surf indeed, with definite size, and it was actually cleaner than we'd expected it would be, so that's a good thing. People are getting surf, but still pretty wild and woolly given the size and the rawness of the swells. We get in Monday, north winds continue over our outer waters along north and central California. Low pressure hanging with south winds over the Hawaiian Islands Monday, slowly starting to give way to almost trades on Tuesday, and a lighter wind regime for California. So we get into Wednesday, finally trades start returning, sort of a east-southeast flow for the Hawaiian Islands, light winds along the California coast. Thursday, big high pressure, you get that clockwise flow around the high, pushing north winds down the California coast, mainly for Northern California early, and then building strong into Central California at 25 knots. Trades for the Hawaiian Islands. As we get into Friday, pretty much the same thing for California and Hawaii. And then Saturday, you can see the big gale building in the northern Gulf, front along the coast pushing into Oregon, south wind starting for Cape Mendocino Saturday morning, starting to build for that in that area, 25 knots, maybe 30 knots by the evening. Light winds south of there. Trades continue for the Hawaiian Islands. Then Sunday, it looks like a south wind event starting to set up for most of the California coast. Stronger trades for the Hawaiian Islands. Notice another strong 1036 millibar high building. Clockwise circulation, counterclockwise circulation with the low here, the gradient, the north winds, but you get this wraparound thing, and then the front here with south winds. We go out to 180 hours, the front down to, we'll say Santa Cruz and pretty much all of California under a south wind mess Sunday night. So something to keep our eyes on there as well. But there is the hope for weather and rain, and that's something we desperately need. All right, precipitation. We can do this there we go, get it centered. Camera's having difficulties this evening, so we're just not going to use it at all. All right, so little bit of precip, but basically high pressure in control of the California coast. But by Monday, a little low pressure starts building. You see the snow into Whistler and northern Washington, and then maybe rain into California and snow for the Sierra on Monday night. And by rain, we mean probably just low clouds and drizzle at best down into Point Conception, but maybe some snow in the higher elevations. And then even light rain down into Southern California as we get into Tuesday morning. That clears out. Another weak system tries to develop, backdoor slider, but it doesn't even make it on Wednesday. And then down the coast again on Thursday. Same sort of deal. More snow. You can see this actually. Let's pull it back. So this is definitely a backdoor. There's this low here. Energy pushing down the Sierra, but high pressure out over the ocean. Supposedly snow developing down the Sierra Thursday morning, down maybe some decent snow by midday Thursday, and down rain even into Southern California Thursday night. That clearing out, high pressure takes over, and then the bigger system, you can see it, the intense rain and snow pushing down the British Columbia coast into Washington, down into Oregon, and approaching California at 180 hours, the front just north of San Francisco, but nothing in the Sierra yet in terms of precipitation, but we assume that that will make its way into inland as time moves on. Looking at the Olympic Valley snow forecast dashboard, about 9 inches of snow forecast. There was actually more in this morning's run of the models. All this is going to be very unstable because it's still, quite a bit out in the future till the main event happens, out past the end here. But at least there's hope now for some precipitation and snow. Let's go check a couple other areas. Kirkwood to get a foot of snow, presumably due to their higher elevation. And Mammoth with more elevation still, squeezing more precipitation out of both. There's two events here. The blue is the actual, just the steady state amount of snow over a 6-hour period. The red here is total accumulation, so maybe 14 inches out of the whole deal. With snow levels, you can see here, this really paints the picture. We're about 12,500 feet today. A little dip going down on the 6th and the 7th, coming back up, and then a big dip in the freeze level down to supposedly 2,000 feet, 2,000 to 3,000 feet between December 9th and the morning of December 12th. And then a slow increase from there. This is the base of Squaw. This is the top of Squaw. So coldness will not be an issue. We just need more precipitation. The yellow here is where the precipitation occurs, and you can see it right here lining up with your 8 inches or so. So you can go look at the dashboards. In fact, maybe we can pull it up here and show you how to get to this. Just where it says snow, go there, click on the page, and you can start rooting around and find all this data there on stormsurf.com. All right, let's go take a look at long term. What's going on with the Madden Julian Oscillation, and of course, El Nino or La Nina. As usual, we start by looking for signs of the active phase of the MJO, the Madden Julian Oscillation. It's that periodic weather oscillation that traverses the planet, goes around on the equator from west to east. The inactive phase is on one half of the planet, the active phase on the other, and they rotate around the planet. When the active phase moves over the Pacific Ocean, what it does is it imparts energy to the jet stream, and when the jet stream's stronger, you start getting troughs, and when you get troughs with energy pushing into them, then you get gales and storms, which in turn produce surf. Also, the active phase of the MJO, when it's over the West Pacific, that in turn can reduce or actually reverse trade winds there, and that takes warm water that's in the West Pacific, start pushing it east in the form of a Kelvin wave. And if you have successive strong active phases of the MJO, that can help usher in El Nino. Well, we don't have to worry about that right now. Clearly, we're in a La Nina state. But let's take a look. What's going on wind-wise? This is the East Pacific here, West Pacific here. Here's the equator. That's New Guinea there. So like Ecuador would be over somewhere like here. We're just looking at the arrows. These is data from the TAO buoy array, a series of buoys strung across the equator used for monitoring El Nino. The arrows are the 5-day average winds. So what we're doing is looking for the length of these arrows and their direction. So wind's pretty strong out of the east over the East Pacific. Central Pacific, very strong easterly winds. Then the Kelvin wave generation area, this area right here, 180, that's the date line. So about from 170, 5 degrees north and south of the equator. You draw a box right here in your mind. You see these winds are moderately from the east. What we want to see is them die or actually reverse direction. But this is just the 5-day average winds. What really matters is the anomalies, the differences from normal for this time of year. So yeah, winds are strong out of the east today, but looking at these arrows, it's kind of a mixed bag of everything all over the place, suggesting, well, these strong easterly winds, that's pretty normal for this time of year in this part of the world. Over the Central Pacific, winds a little bit stronger out of the east than normal, and in the Kelvin wave generation area, same deal, a little bit strong out of the east than normal. So no clear indications of the active phase of the MJO, at least for the moment. Let's go take a look at the 1-week forecast. And here we go, 850 millibar zonal wind anomalies right there. That's just fancy words for, is the wind blowing stronger out of the east or out of the west than normal? So you see these blues and purples, that's stronger than normal easterly winds. We'd say that's typically associated with the inactive phase of the MJO. And the reds are westerly anomalies, typically associated with the active phase of the MJO. Now let's get ourselves oriented. This is the whole planet on one chart, not just the Pacific Ocean. The Pacific Ocean is just a little slice of that. So the far west Pacific Ocean on the equator starts at about 135 east, so right about there. And Ecuador is over about 80 west, so somewhere right over there. You can almost see a seam in the picture right there. Okay, and then the Kelvin wave generation area, so it starts about 135 east and goes to 170 west. So this is the area we're interested in. Oh, and this is past performance here, forecast down here. What you clearly see, and which is actually pretty huge news, is that these westerly anomalies, for the first time since July, first time this entire winter time period, they've moved into the Kelvin wave generation area as of today. In fact, and the dividing line between the east and the west anomalies is about 170 east. So filling about 60% of the Kelvin wave generation area. That is really good news. And then the next 1-week forecast has those westerly anomalies pretty strong, holding that exact same position. So for the first time, it looks like we have this again imparts energy to the jet stream. When we were looking at the jet stream charts, you saw a strong jet stream flow aloft. It was a little bit all over the place, but at least there was wind energy in it, and it's forecast to help support gale development. All right, let's keep digging. All right, so let's go look out 2 weeks. This is the outgoing long wave radiation anomalies, fancy words for cloud cover. Where you have the blues, here is more cloud cover. Where you have the red, less cloud cover, more cloud cover. Again, like the active phase of the MJO is a low pressure system, so it generates clouds. So this would be the active phase. This would be the inactive phase. Four different panels here, 5 days each panel. The equator, right there. South America, Chile, Peru, Galapagos, Central America there, Hawaii, New Guinea there, 180 west, that's the date line. Kelvin wave generation area basically there. So, according to this, right now, and this is the statistic model, the active phase of the MJO is moving over the Kelvin wave generation area. Supposed to continue doing that 5 days from now, building over the date line 10 days from now, and holding 15 days from now. That according to the statistic model. The dynamic model painting pretty much the same picture, but there's the statistic, there's the dynamic, maybe not quite as strong as what the statistic model says. It's normally interesting because normally it's the dynamic model that's stronger than the statistic, but so the roles are reversed, but still the two models pretty much in sync. All right, this is phase diagram charts, a deeper dive into the two charts we just looked at. This is the statistic model, this is the dynamic model. What are we looking at here? Well, we are trying to figure out where the active phase is exactly, and is it stronger or weaker as compared to other active phases in past history. So the MJO moves from west to east, from the Indian Ocean over the maritime continent, things like Bali, to the West Pacific, to the East Pacific, under the United States, across the Atlantic, over Africa, back to the Indian Ocean. Round and round she goes. The heavy dot is where the active phase is right now, so about halfway between the maritime continent and the West Pacific, just moving into the West Pacific. The further the dot is away from this circle, the stronger the active phase is. And for the first time, we have an active phase. It's almost in the West Pacific, and it's moderately strong. 3 different forecast members suggest, well, one saying it crashing and being very weak, another saying it being weak, and a third one saying moderately strong, and we'll say moderate, in the East Pacific 2 weeks from now. The GEFS model, the dynamic model, says the active phase pretty solid, moderately solid in the, we'll say, Central Pacific 2 weeks from now. And then we go look at the upper level model. Now this suggests areas favorable for precipitation. The green's favorable for precipitation, the yellows, oranges not favorable. So consider this the active phase, consider this the inactive phase. 8 different panels here going out 40 days. Look at each panel. South America, Chile, Peru, the Galapagos, Central America, Hawaii right there, New Guinea, the equator, 0, the date line, roughly there. So the active phase moving into the Kelvin wave generation area today, continuing out across the Kelvin wave generation area to about the 20th of December, then starting to lose identity as it always done while moving into Central America on the 14th of January, while the inactive phase starts pushing into the West Pacific right around Christmas or so, and then making its trek across the Pacific. And then on the mid-January, another active phase, pretty strong, this one at least forecast stronger than the one we're currently in. Don't know whether that's believable or not, but a clear sign that we're moving from active phase, inactive phase, active phase, as compared to where we've been for months, where literally the active phase of the MJO has just done nothing. It has been non-existent. It appears that we're starting to move into a pattern where there's a more regular MJO rhythm, and that's really important. Next up, the 4-week CFS model. Again, whole planet on one chart. The blues are the east component of the wind, the reds, the west component of the winds. All right, and let's get ourselves oriented. So the date line runs right up the middle. Whole planet on one chart here. Kelvin wave generation area starts about 130 east, so this area right here is what we're really interested in. Okay, and it's real obvious here. The reds, westerly anomalies, and you can see them pushing into the Kelvin wave generation area today and forecast to hold in some fashion almost for the next month. Very good news. What's driving it? Well, so the dotted contour black line here, this is the inactive phase of the MJO. You can see it's almost out of the Kelvin wave generation area today. And here is the active phase of the MJO building over the West Pacific, forecast making its trek across the Pacific through January 1st or so. And dragging westerly anomalies almost across the Kelvin wave generation area, but not completely. See this break? Westerly anomalies, little patch of easterly anomalies around 18th of December, and then westerly anomalies trying to redevelop once you get past the date line. Again, La Niña has a lock on what's going on over the date line, but the MJO is trying to make a comeback, trying, it appears, to dislodge or at least destructively interfere with La Niña. That's a good sign. And then finally, the 3-month CFS model. Now, we don't believe a model a week out, much less 3 months out, but it's fun to follow and get at least an idea of what might be coming. All right, so this is the same deal. Whole plan on one chart. Date line runs right up the middle. The forecast is up top on this chart. You see the dates here. Whereas this is past performance. The thing you notice, Kelvin wave generation area, 135 east to about 170 west. Preponderance of blues, easterly anomalies that have been in control. Notice this push of westerly anomalies here. This is the current active phase of the MJO. We're just eyeballing this. Looks like it's going to make it the whole way to the date line or more, at least for a couple of days around the 21st of December. Then giving up ground and easterly anomalies return after that. Let's overlay the MJO. Here we go. The solid red contours are the active phase of the MJO. So we're coming out of this dotted contour, the inactive phase. Active phase just starting to build today. Expected to take over through about, what is that right there? That'd be about January 13th, something like that. Followed by the inactive phase. But notice westerly anomalies holding in the Kelvin wave generation area almost right to the end of the inactive phase here about January 30th. And then another active phase builds right behind that with westerly anomalies taking over, pushing to roughly about 160 east, so about halfway through the Kelvin wave generation area. So the sense of one, this is one back in October, another one, maybe another, we'll see. It feels like the MJO wants to try to wake up and actually do something good for us. We'll have to wait and see whether that really happens. And then finally, the low pass filter. This is the high and low pressure bias in the atmosphere. The dotted contour is a high pressure bias, right smack over the date line. La Niña, if you ever want it. If you'd ever want to see it, this is it, La Niña. But slowly you get the sense the high pressure bias is to start moving east, still centered a bit over the date line, but not as much as it is right now, with the low pressure bias, which all last winter was over the maritime continent and the Indian Ocean, trying to slowly make a foray into the Pacific, trying to dislodge the high pressure bias. This is what we need desperately to get us out of this La Niña pattern. Second year of La Niña. Will it happen this winter? Well, we're out to March here, and still the high pressure bias or the low pressure bias, maybe making it halfway into the Kelvin wave generation area, which isn't a whole lot. You see the bulk of westerly anomalies follow this low pressure bias here, whereas the blues, the easterly anomalies, follow the high pressure bias. So we want the high pressure bias out of the Pacific, low pressure bias over the Pacific, and then that would constructively interfere with the MJO, really helping to feed storm development. Don't know if that's going to happen this winter or not, but if we can just get even a couple little windows, that would be better than nothing. And just a quick look here. So this is the strength of the active phase of the MJO over time. So this year, there's been literally no real active phase. Back in, June, there was one significant active phase, and that's what helped kick off some Kelvin waves and helped we had a break in La Niña in the early part of this summer, but then once we got in July, it was all over. Last year, same deal. Literally, no active phase of the MJO except in February, one pulse, and that was it. We really need to get at least to this kind of a pattern. This was 2018 where you have stronger active phases, or maybe this in 2015, which was a El Nino year. You can really see the difference between El Nino here and La Niña like here in 2016. The MJO, just the active phase, just gets suppressed like here, okay? We need the active phase to feed the jet stream, to feed the storm track, and to provide moisture. Next up, subsurface ocean temperatures. This is the West Pacific here. This is the East Pacific here. This is just data from on the equator from the TAO buoy array, that series of buoys used for monitoring El Nino. See these little X's here? Those are sensors on the anchor lines of the buoys. So there's data missing here and little pieces here. And you can see there's kind of gaps here and there, but you use this data from these sensors and a model to fill in the gaps, and you get build a profile of the subsurface ocean temperatures. The reds are warmer than normal temperatures, so much warmer temperatures, 29 degree isotherm, that's 29 degrees centigrade, 28 degree isotherm here at about 175 east last week, so it's actually creeping east a little bit. That's a good thing. The 24 degree isotherm, rock solid at 125 west, but not pushing into Ecuador at all, so sort of pulled back from the coast. Very shallow area of weakly warm water in the East Pacific, typical of La Niña, with all the warm water stored up in the West Pacific. But it's not the actual temperatures, it's the anomalies, differences from normal for this time of year. See, warm water at depth, where is that? I think that's 150 west right there. We'll verify that real quick. Yep, there we go, 150 west. So south of Hawaii. Warm water from there back to the west, but not making it any further. Cold water, 2 degrees below normal in the East Pacific, typical, and 1 degree below normal water here south of the Hawaiian Islands. This is pretty typical of La Niña. Actually, this isn't nearly as bad as it was a couple of weeks ago, or certainly a month ago. A big pool of cool water that was here for several months is, we believe, in the process of discharging to the surface. If that can be discharged and gotten out here, then maybe, and with successive active phases of the MJO, then maybe we can at least return to a more normal pattern. A higher res model of that same data suggesting the same picture. Warm water backed up in the west, cold water in the east, but this giant bolus of cool water here is not nearly as bad as it was even a week ago, 2 weeks ago, a month ago, 2 months ago. The cold water slowly discharging to the surface. The Galapagos are somewhere right around in here. So advecting up to the surface and then getting carried off to the west by trade winds. Another bit of good news here. So this is ocean height, sea surface height. The sphere of the ocean. Is the ocean high? Strip out the wind waves, and tides, and is the sphere of the ocean higher or lower than normal? This is the equator here. There's your date line right there. It's hard to see, but that's Chile, Peru, Galapagos. That looks like a dollar sign right there. That's the Galapagos. Central America, Baja, California, Hawaii right there, and New Guinea right there. What you see is lower surface heights, which equates to cold water. Cold water contracts. When it contracts, it creates a divot on the ocean surface. The big news here is right here, minus 15 centimeters anomaly. This was 3 times as big last week, and 3 or 4 weeks before that, it was down to like 25 centimeters below normal. Now we're down to just this one little pool here and one little pool here of 15 centimeter anomalies, suggesting that cool water at depth is in fact gurgling up to the surface, erupting to the surface, and then will get carried off to the east. And once that happens, that's pretty much the end of La Niña. Upper ocean heat anomalies, you get the same sort of pattern. So this is the West Pacific here, East Pacific here. Time. Reds are warmer than normal temps. The blues, cooler than normal temps. Last December, our La Niña signature, cool water filling the entire East Pacific to, where is that? About the date line right there. Then we had this break in March, April, May. 3 Kelvin waves made it across the Pacific because La Nina kind of backed off. Then it woke up again in July. Even a much larger pool of cool water set up at depth, peaking about the middle of October. But you can see that is in quick and rapid decline right now, with that cold water as it's gurgling to the surface starting to get pushed off to the west as well. So we think this is the demise of La Nina. Next up, sea surface temperature anomalies. Chile right there, Peru there, Galapagos about there, Central America, Mexico, Hawaii, the equator right there. And this is the focus right here. Cold water gurgling up to the surface from that pool, that subsurface pool of cool water that's down in here somewhere, gurgling up to the surface. Then it gets caught. Well, we have high pressure here, creating trades. High pressure here, circulating counterclockwise, creating trades. Taking that cold water, then dragging it out along the equator, out past to the date line and beyond. This is the classic La Nina signature. Colder than normal water all along South America, all along the equator, out to the date line. El Nino, you'd have the exact opposite. All this would be warmer than normal temps. See the reds? They'd be all balled up right here. But clearly that's not the case. With cold water, you get suppression of evaporation. When you get suppression of evaporation, that feeds high pressure above it. When you have high pressure, especially when it's along the equator here near California, it becomes very difficult for storms to develop and penetrate and track across the North Pacific. Instead, they push north. In fact, we can go up here. Well, actually, we'll talk about this in a second. Sea surface temperature trend for the past 7 days. Temperatures warming slightly off of Chile and Peru, cooling slightly, though, again, from the Galapagos off east, given that upwelling event that's going on right now. And then back to this, what's going on here? Well, so you have all this cold water, which creates stable air above it, high pressure. And so the jet stream comes ripping off Japan. It interacts or senses high pressure. The jet starts pushing off to the north, ridges up over, and then falls down inland, okay? And you leave all this area here, which normally storms are ripping through here in the winter, creating swell. Instead, you have blocking high pressure, sort of locking things down, all driven by these surface temperatures on the equator here. That's why following the MJO, following El Nino and La Nina is so important to be building and being able to predict, relatively speaking, how much surf you're going to have during the winter. And you can actually look out 3, 6, sometimes 9 months and get a pretty good sense of what's going on. All right, sea surface temperatures in the Niño 1.2 area. That's the area, the Galapagos, Peru, Ecuador. Temperatures today, pretty stable for the past, 1, 2, 3 weeks. But when that subsurface pool started erupting to the surface, you see temperatures drop off today. Temperatures 1.591 degrees below normal. That's pretty cold. 1.5 degrees below normal. We were about 0.5 degree below normal earlier this fall, but with, again, the building of La Nina, temperatures dropping. But this area, it matters, but not so much. It's the official El Nino monitoring region, the Niño 3.4 region. This is the area from south of California on the equator out to about the date line. Temperatures actually at the moment pretty stable at 869 thousandths of a degree below normal. So, and that's about where it's been. We were down to about 1 or 1.05 degrees below normal in early November. And we're, for the moment, holding steady, kind of doubting that we might not go any lower than this. Remember this number, about, let's say, 0.9 of a degree. Here's the trends real quick. In the Niño 1.2 region, it warmed up this summer. You can see it here. 0 is, where is it? Somewhere, I can't hardly read it. Somewhere right about there. And now temperatures falling there. But the Niño 3.4 region, that's the one we were looking at, actually looked like they bottomed out in November, starting to work their way up a little bit. We'll see. But it sort of smells like the worst is over. All right. So we know what's going on in the ocean, but what's going on in the atmosphere above the ocean? We know we have cold water, and we think we have stable air above in the atmosphere above. But what's really happening in the Pacific? We look at the Southern Oscillation Index, difference in pressure between Tahiti, which is in the Pacific, and Darwin, which is more or less in the Indian Ocean. When the index, the daily index, is negative, then we could say, well, pressure is lower in Tahiti. So you just eyeball down here through, and you see it's been positive for, well, all month, and very positive indeed. That certainly smells at least of the inactive phase of the MJO, if not La Niña. 30-day average takes some of the noise out of this, because it goes like from minus 1.7 up to 12, from 30 to minus, it kind of bounces all around. So this smooths it out. 12 plus 12.67 today. All right. And where were we? Well, we were at 6.0 roughly, going up to plus 12, almost 13. So a definite sense of the inactive phase of the MJO at minimum, if not a building La Niña pattern. The 90-day average is the true El Niño La Niña indicator. Oh, and by the way, this got up to about, I think it averaged plus 19 in last year's La Niña. So we're not as high as we were last year. I think that happened in January. The 90-day average today, 9.71, plus 9.71. Where were we a month ago? 8.16. So, yeah, creeping up. We were at 10, was that a week or so ago? Down a little, but, not horrible. This went up to plus 15 last year. And this, not looking, I don't know that we're going to make it to 15. We'll see, but if that cool pool is discharging right now, well, as it discharges, there's probably a delayed effect of high pressure building. So we'll see. We'll keep our eye on it, but maybe we won't end up, at worst, equivalent to last year, but hopefully not even that bad. And then finally, the forecast sea surface temperature anomalies for the Niño 3.4 region, the official El Niño monitoring region. So where are we? Today we're mid-October, mid-November, somewhere right around here. This says temperatures today at minus 1 degree. And that's what the other chart we were looking at said minus 9. So that's about right. This forecast model suggests temperatures dropping to minus 1.4 in mid-January. That would be the peak of La Niña. And then recovering from there to neutral as we get into next summer. But this is kind of an oddball one. The PDF corrected probably is a little bit more accurate, suggesting temperatures going down to only minus 1.25 degrees, so a degree and a quarter, in about mid-December, so maybe a week and a half from now, and then just staying there. So again, that suggests we're pretty much at the bottom, as bad as it's going to get right now, and then recovering from there. That is actually good news. So we'll see if we can get this to work here. But for now, things are looking better. Yes, maybe we are at the peak of La Niña right now, or in the next 2 to 3 weeks. And from there, an improving pattern suggested. That is good news. Even better yet, the active phase of the MJO, the first real one in quite a while, is building as we speak and forecast to make its way across the Pacific over the coming 2 to 3 weeks. That, in turn, should help promote storm production. And we have a legitimate gale forecast in the North Pacific in the next week. And there's actually one that's set up north of Hawaii that generate near significant class surf today. So things are getting better. And even beyond that, rain forecast for California, snow in the Sierra. Not a lot, but a little bit. And every little bit helps. So we're actually in not a bad place for right now, especially moving towards Christmas. Looks like there's going to be surf on the way, snow on the way, and rain on the way. All right, so if you enjoyed the video, give us a thumbs up. We'd appreciate it. If you have any questions, leave a comment. We try to respond pretty quickly. And if you haven't subscribed, please subscribe, ring the bell. You'll get notified every time we post a video, or go to stormsurf.com. You see it right there on your screen, stormsurf.com. And all the data that you saw tonight is available on the site. You can pick through the charts there, build your own forecast, and then compare it to the video when we post it next week. And then, of course, if you have questions, you don't understand something, please write in and we will explain it. All right, that's it for this week. We'll do it again next week. Same time, same channel. Thanks for watching.